The massive chamber floated in the darkness of space like a jewel catching starlight. Inside, representatives from over 100 alien species sat in circular rows, all facing the center platform. This was the Galactic Council, the organization that had maintained peace across thousands of worlds for 10,000 years. Today they waited for humanity. Captain Jiwan Park walked through the entrance corridor with measured steps. Behind her came Ambassador Hyunsik, Nam and Dr. Minji Kang. All three wore simple, dark blue uniforms with the Earth emblem on their shoulders. They had spent 6 months preparing for this moment since first contact. Now everything humanity hoped for depended on what happened in the next few hours. The council speaker, a tall being covered in golden feathers named Thelmar, spread his wings in greeting. His voice came through the translation device implanted in every visitor's ear. Welcome, representatives of humanity. We are pleased to finally conduct formal integration proceedings. Jiwan noticed how he said integration, not negotiation. She glanced at Minji, who was already taking notes on a small device. The doctor studied alien psychology and had warned them about this. The council didn't see this as a discussion between equals. Ambassador Nam bowed slightly. Thank you for receiving us, Counselor Thelmar. Earth is honored to stand before such an ancient assembly. Ancient indeed, said a rough voice from the upper tiers. A reptilian creature with dark green scales leaned forward. This was High Magistrate Vorn, commander of the Council's military forces. We have guided the galaxy through ages of peace and prosperity. Today we extend that same guidance to your species. The ambassador nodded but said nothing. Jiwan recognized his diplomatic face, the one that revealed nothing about his thoughts. Thelmar activated a holographic display in the center of the chamber. The integration process is standard for all new spacefaring species. These terms have been accepted by 127 civilizations before you. The hologram showed page after page of conditions. Jiwan read them carefully, her military training kicking in. With each page, her jaw tightened. First, Thelmar continued, all vessels capable of faster-than-light travel must be registered with Council oversight. This ensures no species can threaten galactic peace through unauthorized expansion. Minji whispered to Jiwan. They want control of our ships. Second, all colonization efforts must be approved and supervised by Council authorities. This prevents territorial disputes and resource conflicts. They choose where we can go, Jiwan whispered back. Third, all species must share technological advances with the Council database. This promotes universal development and prevents dangerous weapons research. They want our FTL drive specifications, Yunsik said quietly. The list continued. Population controls to prevent overcrowding. Economic integration under Council currency. Military forces limited to 0.1% of total population. Education systems aligned with Council standards. Cultural exchanges managed through approved channels. When Thelmar finished, he folded his wings with satisfaction. These terms ensure peace, stability, and mutual prosperity. They have served the galaxy well for thousands of years. An insectoid being named Counselor Yessa spoke up, her mandibles clicking softly. We understand this is much to consider. However, the terms are non-negotiable. They represent the collective wisdom of ages. Ambassador Nam stood silently for a long moment. The entire chamber waited. Jiwan could feel the expectation in the air. Every species represented here had accepted these terms. Some had argued, some had asked for modifications, but all had eventually signed. Finally, Hyunsik spoke. May I ask a question before we proceed? Of course, Thelmar said. Of the 127 species that accepted integration, how many did so willingly in their first meeting? The chamber fell silent. Thelmar's feathers ruffled slightly. That information is not relevant to current proceedings. I'll take that as none, Yunsik said calmly. Which brings me to my next question. What happens if a species refuses? High Magistrate Vorn's eyes narrowed. No species has refused. That wasn't my question. Vorn stood, his large frame imposing even at a distance. Young species often fail to understand what is in their best interest. The Council provides guidance. Sometimes that guidance must be enforced for the good of all. Enforced, Yunsik repeated. You mean through military action? We prefer the term compliance protocols, Thelmer interjected quickly. But such measures have never been necessary. All species eventually see the wisdom of integration. Juan watched as several council members shifted uncomfortably. Minji was frantically typing notes. The doctor had been right about everything so far. Ambassador Nam turned to his companions. Captain Park, Dr. Kong, do you have anything to add? Juan stepped forward. I spent the last week studying the military specifications of council vessels. Your technology is impressive. Old, but impressive. Is there a point to this observation? Vorn asked. Just that wars aren't won by old technology and overwhelming numbers alone. They're won by those willing to pay the price for what they believe in. There will be no war, Thelmer said firmly. There is only integration and peace. Or compliance protocols, Juan added. Min Ji spoke for the first time, her voice soft but clear. I've studied the history of every species in this chamber. Not one of you achieved space travel without first overcoming division, war, and near extinction. You all learned unity through suffering. Yet now you impose unity on others without letting them learn these lessons themselves. We spare them the suffering, Counselor Yessa said. Is that not compassionate? Or is it control? Minji asked. Compassion allows choice. Control removes it. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Thelmer raised his wings for silence. This philosophical debate is unnecessary. The terms are clear. Do you accept integration or not? Ambassador Yunsik Nam picked up the holographic document. He read through it one more time while the entire council watched. Then he set it down gently on the platform. On behalf of the United Earth Government and all humanity, I must respectfully decline these terms. The chamber exploded into chaos. Voices rose in dozens of languages, all translated simultaneously into a cacophony of shock and disbelief. Counselor stood, gesturing wildly. Thelmer's wings spread wide as he tried to restore order. Decline? Vorn's voice cut through the noise. You cannot decline integration? It is not optional. Everything is optional, Yunsik said calmly. That's what freedom means. You don't understand what you're refusing, Thelmer said, his voice strained. The protection, the resources, the technology, the peace? We understand perfectly, Juan said. You're offering us safety in exchange for sovereignty? You want us to trade our future for your control. This is madness, another counselor shouted. Your species has barely left your home system. You have no idea what dangers exist in the galaxy. Then we'll face them as free people, Yunsik said. Humanity thanks the Galactic Council for this meeting. We appreciate the offer of integration, but we must decline. We choose to remain independent. The ambassador turned and walked toward the exit. Giwan and Minji followed. Behind them, the chamber descended into chaos again. Voices demanded they be stopped, that enforcement protocols be initiated immediately. That this insult to the council could not stand. Thelmer's voice rose above the others. You have made a grave mistake, humans. The galaxy does not permit independent actors. You will reconsider or you will face the consequences. At the doorway, Yunsik paused and looked back. Counselor Thelmer, humanity has faced extinction more times than we can count. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own worst impulses. We've learned one lesson above all others. He paused. Freedom is worth any price. Even the disapproval of an ancient council. The three humans left the chamber. Behind them, the council argued about what to do with a species that had done the unthinkable. For 10,000 years, every species had eventually submitted to their terms. Humanity had just become the first to say no. On the journey back to their ship, none of them spoke. They knew what was coming. The council would not accept this refusal. There would be threats, sanctions, maybe even military action. Earth would face its greatest challenge yet, but as Juan looked at her companions, she saw no fear in their eyes. Only determination. Humanity had not fought its way to the stars. just to surrender its future to strangers. The real negotiation was about to begin. And this time, the terms would be different. The warning came exactly 7 days after the humans left the council chamber. A massive ship appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system, its hull dark and angular. This was an Enforcer-class vessel designed specifically for what the council called compliance operations. Its commander, Enforcer Prime Kreeth, sent a single message that echoed across every communication channel humanity possessed. The Galactic Council has granted humanity 30 days to reconsider integration. Failure to comply will result in enforcement protocols. This is not negotiable. Admiral Daeho Choi stood in Earth's Defense Command Center, watching the alien ship on the main display. Around him, officers worked at their stations with focused intensity. The Admiral was a man in his 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen too many conflicts. He had spent his entire career preparing Earth's defenses for potential alien threats. Now that threat had arrived. Analysis, he said calmly. A young officer looked up from her console. The vessel is approximately 3 kilometers long. Energy signatures suggest heavy shielding and multiple weapon systems. It's maintaining position just beyond the outer planets. One ship, Daeho said. They send one ship as a threat? It's a big ship, sir, the officer replied. Size isn't everything. The Admiral turned to his communications officer. Get me President Kwan. Thousands of kilometers away, President Wenji Kwan sat in her office reading Dr. Minji Kong's latest report. The doctor had spent the past week analyzing every interaction with the council, every word spoken, every gesture made. Her conclusions were disturbing. The integration terms aren't about peace, Minji had written. They're about control. Every provision is designed to prevent species from developing independent power. The technology sharing ensures no one advances beyond the Council's oversight. The population controls keep species weak. The military limitations make resistance impossible. This isn't a federation of equals. It's an empire that calls itself a council. A chime interrupted Yunji's reading. Admiral Choi appeared on her screen. Madam President, we have a situation. After the briefing, Yunji stood and walked to her window. Below, the city sprawled in every direction, millions of people going about their lives. They had no idea that everything was about to change. She picked up her communication device and called for an emergency session with Earth's leadership. 3 hours later, Ambassador Yunsik Nam joined a virtual meeting with leaders from every nation on Earth. Faces from every continent looked back at him from the massive display wall. Some appeared worried, others angry, all of them uncertain. They're bullying us, said one leader. One ship appears and makes demands. This is unacceptable. It's also predictable, Yunsik replied. The Council has maintained power for 10,000 years by doing exactly this. A show of force, an ultimatum, and eventually submission? What choice do we have? Another leader asked. They have technology centuries ahead of ours. They have hundreds of worlds behind them. We have one planet and a handful of ships. President Yunji spoke up. We have something else. We have choice. Ambassador Nam, what did you learn about the other species? Hyunsik pulled up files on his display. Dr. Kang and I researched every species in the Council. Not one of them accepted integration willingly on the first meeting. The Taurian Confederacy held out for 3 years before economic sanctions destroyed their trade network. The Vexen Collective lasted 5 years before a military blockade starved their colonies. The pattern is always the same. Threaten, isolate, escalate, conquer. They call it compliance, not conquest, Minji added, joining the meeting remotely. But the result is the same. Every species loses independence. Every culture becomes diluted. Every advancement becomes controlled. So we're supposed to fight an entire galactic civilization? A military leader asked. Admiral Daeho shook his head. Not fight, resist. There's a difference. The Council expects us to behave like every other species. They expect us to calculate the odds, realize we can't win, and submit. They don't understand humans very well yet. What don't they understand? Yunji asked. That we're crazy enough to try anyway. Silence filled the virtual meeting room. Then slowly one leader started nodding. Then another. Then more. They had all studied human history. They knew what their species was capable of when backed into a corner. Humanity didn't always win, but they never stopped fighting. President Yunji made the decision. We maintain our refusal. We prepare our defenses. We show the Council that some things aren't for sale. Back in his ship at the edge of the solar system, Enforcer Prime Kreeth received Earth's response with disbelief. He read the message 3 times to make sure the translation was correct. The United Earth government appreciates the Council's concern. However, our position remains unchanged. We respectfully decline integration and request that the Council respect our sovereignty. We harbor no hostile intent toward any Council species and wish only to be left in peace. Kreeth sent the message to the Council immediately. Within hours, he received new orders. The blockade was authorized. No ships in or out of human space. If they wanted to be independent, they could be independently isolated. More Council ships began arriving. Not warships yet, just patrol vessels and customs monitors. They established a perimeter around the entire solar system. Every route in or out was watched. The message was clear: humanity could keep their sovereignty, but only if they were willing to accept complete isolation. On Earth, the response was not what the Council expected. Instead of panic or calls for reconsideration, something else happened. The planet united in a way it never had before. President Yunji addressed the world from the United Nations building. Her speech was broadcast to every device, every screen, every communication channel on the planet. For the first time in our history, humanity stands as one species facing one challenge. We are not divided by nations or beliefs or resources. We are united by a single principle that every human understands: freedom. She paused, letting the words sink in. The Galactic Council offers us safety in exchange for our independence. They offer us protection in exchange for our future. They offer us peace in exchange for our choice. We say no, not because we don't value peace, not because we don't understand the risks, but because some things matter more than comfort. On the streets, in homes, in cities across the planet, people watched and listened. Many were afraid. Some argued for accepting the Council's terms, but more people felt something else stirring inside them: pride, defiance, the stubborn, human refusal to bow. Yunji continued. Our ancestors fought for centuries to reach this point. They overcame wars, diseases, disasters, and their own worst nature. They did it so we could stand here today as one species with one voice. And that voice says, we choose our own path. The speech went viral across the planet. Within days, it was being translated and broadcast beyond Earth. Some Council species intercepted the transmissions. They heard a human leader speaking words their own leaders had forgotten long ago. Words about choice and freedom and the right to determine one's own future. Dr. Minji Kang noticed something interesting in the data. She brought it to Ambassador Hyunsik Nam's attention immediately. Look at this, she said, showing him communication patterns from Council space. After the President's speech, we detected increased chatter between certain Council species. They're talking about us? Some of them are asking questions. What kind of questions? Hyunsik asked. Questions about whether they ever had a choice. Questions about what their worlds were like before integration. Questions about freedom. The ambassador smiled slightly. The Council might have made a mistake. What mistake? They thought isolating us would make us reconsider. Instead, they gave us a platform. Every species in the galaxy is now watching to see what happens when someone says no to the Council. Over the next 3 weeks, the standoff continued. Council ships maintained their blockade. Human vessels tested the perimeter but didn't try to break through yet. Both sides watched and waited. Admiral Deho used the time to prepare his forces. Running drills and updating tactics, Captain Yuan Park commanded one of Earth's fastest destroyers. The Soul's Pride, she spent hours studying the Council ships' movements, learning their patterns, understanding their weaknesses. She noticed something important. They moved in predictable formations. They followed standard procedures. They did everything by the book. They've been at peace too long, she told her crew. They've forgotten what real combat looks like. They think war is about procedure and protocol. Her tactical officer nodded. And what is war actually about? Chaos, Jawan replied. And humans are very good at chaos. On the 29th day of the ultimatum, Enforcer Prime Kreeth sent his final message to Earth. His patience was exhausted. The Council had given humanity every chance to be reasonable. You have 1 day remaining. Accept integration or face enforcement. There will be no further extensions. No more negotiations. Submit or suffer the consequences. In Earth's Defense Command, Admiral Deho read the message and smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a soldier who had been preparing for this moment his entire career. Send a response, he told his communications officer. Keep it simple. The message that returned to Kreeth contained only 2 words. Come try. The Council blockade consisted of 300 ships arranged in perfect geometric patterns around Earth's solar system. Enforcer Prime Kreeth commanded from his flagship at the center of the formation. He had conducted 17 compliance operations during his career. This would be his 18th, and he expected it to be routine. At exactly midnight Universal Standard Time, the first human ship appeared on his sensors, then another, then 20 more. Within minutes, over 100 human vessels emerged from various positions across the solar system. They moved in no recognizable formation. Some were military destroyers, others were armed freighters. A few were civilian ships that had been hastily equipped with weapons. Disorganized, Kreeth's tactical officer observed. They have no unified strategy. That's what makes them dangerous, Kreeth replied. He had read the reports about humanity. These creatures had spent thousands of years fighting each other. War was in their nature. All units maintained defensive positions. Let them come to us. We'll demonstrate the futility of resistance. On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Captain Jiwan Park reviewed the tactical display one final time. Her ship was part of Strike Group 7, tasked with creating chaos in the blockade's northwestern quadrant. She looked at her crew, young men and women who had volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. Remember your training, she said. We're not trying to destroy their fleet. We're trying to make them think twice about underestimating us. Hit hard, move fast, and don't play by their rules. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Sunho Lee, nodded. All weapons ready, Captain, FTL, drive charged. Then let's introduce ourselves properly. Jawan opened the ship-wide channel. All hands, this is the captain. Today we write a new chapter in human history. Whatever happens, know that you're fighting for something that matters. For the freedom of every human who comes after us. She closed the channel and gave the order. Engage FTL, target the nearest patrol group. The Soul's Pride vanished from its position and reappeared 3,000 kilometers away, right in the middle of a council patrol formation. The alien ships barely had time to react before human weapons opened fire. Kinetic rounds traveling at relativistic speeds tore through shields designed to stop energy weapons. Missiles with erratic flight patterns confused point defense systems, calibrated for predictable trajectories. Within 30 seconds, 2 council ships were disabled and drifting. The Soul's Pride jumped again before the aliens could coordinate a response. Across the blockade, similar attacks erupted simultaneously. Human ships appeared, struck, and vanished in a pattern that seemed random but was actually carefully coordinated chaos. The Council forces tried to adapt, but their procedures weren't designed for this kind of warfare. They're not following standard engagement protocols, Kreeth's tactical officer reported, his voice rising in frustration. They jump in, attack, and retreat before we can respond. Our targeting systems can't predict their movements. That's because there's no pattern, Kreeth replied grimly. They're improvising. Every ship commander is making independent decisions. That's tactically unsound. How do they maintain coordination? They don't, that's the point. We can't predict what they'll do because they don't know what they'll do until they do it. Another alarm sounded. 3 more Council ships reported damage. The blockade was coming apart not because the humans were winning, but because they were refusing to fight in any way the Council understood. Commander Sun Ho Lee piloted his own destroyer, the Indomitable Spirit, alongside 2 armed freighters. His target was a Council supply convoy trying to reinforce the blockade. The convoy had 12 escort ships, each larger than his destroyer. In any conventional battle, attacking would be suicide. Sun Ho didn't fight conventionally. He jumped his task force directly into the convoy's formation, not outside it. The escorts couldn't fire without risking hitting their own supply ships. Before they could adjust, Sun Ho's ships disabled 3 transports and jumped away. "Got them," his weapons officer reported with grim satisfaction. "Don't celebrate yet," Sun Ho replied. "We've just made them angry. Now comes the hard part, staying alive." A civilian freighter captain named Yuna Kim became an unexpected hero during the battle. She commanded a transport ship called Lucky Dragon, modified with a few missiles and an upgraded FTL drive. When a Council patrol caught her trying to break through the blockade, she did something no one expected. She flew directly at them. The Council ships, following their protocols, tried to disable her ship without destroying it. They wanted to capture vessels intact for propaganda purposes. Yuna exploited this hesitation. She fired her missiles at point-blank range, then jumped through a gap in their formation before they could return fire. Her stunt worked. The blockade developed a gap, and 5 other civilian ships escaped through it. Earth's orbital stations broadcast footage of Yuna's run, and within hours she became a symbol of human resistance. Regular people fighting military forces with courage and creativity, but the battle had costs. The destroyer Morning Star took a direct hit while covering a retreat. Its captain, Commander Taijin Bei, kept his ship between the Council forces and a damaged civilian vessel trying to reach safety. He bought them 3 minutes, enough time to escape. But his ship couldn't withstand the concentrated fire. Taijin's final transmission was brief. "For everyone who comes after us, for our choice." Then the Morning Star's reactor went critical, destroying the vessel and damaging 2 nearby Council ships in the explosion. 17 more human ships were lost in the first engagement. Over 2,000 people died. But they achieved their objective. The blockade was broken in 3 sectors. Human ships could now move in and out of the solar system, though not safely or easily. More importantly, they had demonstrated something the Council hadn't seen in millennia: determination. The willingness to fight against overwhelming odds for an abstract principle called freedom. Admiral Deho watched the battle reports coming in from his command center. The losses hurt, but the results exceeded his projections. "Send reinforcements to secure the breakthrough points. And get me casualty reports for all ships." President Yunji stood beside him, her face pale but resolute. "So many dead already. And this is just the beginning." "Yes, Madam President. The Council will escalate now. We've embarrassed them. They'll need to respond with force. Then we'll face whatever comes." In the Council chamber, chaos reigned for the 2nd time in a month. Councillor Thelmer's feathers were ruffled in distress as he read the reports. 47 ships damaged, 12 destroyed. The blockade broken in multiple locations. And worst of all, the humans were still transmitting their defiant messages across the galaxy. High Magistrate Vorn's anger was palpable. "This is unacceptable. We gave them every chance to submit peacefully. Now they must be taught the price of defiance. What are you proposing?" Councillor Yessa asked carefully. "I'm proposing we stop playing games. We authorized a blockade, they broke it. Now we authorize a real military response. Send the Dreadnought fleet." The chamber fell silent. The Dreadnought fleet was the Council's ultimate weapon, 20 massive warships, each capable of orbital bombardment. They had been used only 4 times in Council history, always to devastating effect. Entire civilizations had submitted rather than face them. "That seems excessive," Yessa protested. "They're one species. One planet. One species that just humiliated our enforcement fleet," Vorn countered. "If we don't respond decisively, others will think they can defy the Council too. This rebellion must be crushed completely." The vote was called. The dreadnought fleet was authorized by a margin of 84 to 43. 43 council members abstained or voted against, a historically high number. Yessa noted this with interest. The humans were creating cracks in council unity. Dr. Minji Kong noticed those cracks too. She spent her time analyzing council communications, looking for any advantage Earth could exploit. What she discovered was fascinating. Ambassador, she said, pulling Hyunsik aside during a strategy meeting. Look at this. After our breakout, we detected increased communications between species on the Council's outer regions. They're not discussing military matters, they're discussing philosophy. Philosophy? Freedom, choice, independence, concepts they haven't talked about in generations. Some of them are starting to remember what they gave up when they joined the Council. Hyunsik studied the data. So we're not just fighting a military battle? We're fighting an ideological one, exactly. The Council's power is based on everyone. Accepting that integration is inevitable and beneficial. We're challenging that assumption. Every day we resist, we prove an alternative is possible. Then we need to make sure everyone in the galaxy knows what we're doing and why. The ambassador had an idea. Can you set up a broadcast system that reaches beyond council space? I can try. What do you want to say? The truth about why we're fighting. About what the council really is, about what freedom means. While the humans prepared their broadcast, Enforcer Prime Kreeth prepared his fleet for the arrival of the dreadnoughts. His career was effectively over after this failure. The best he could hope for was to assist in the final subjugation of humanity and salvage some honor. The dreadnought fleet hung in space like ancient predators, their massive hulls scarred from centuries of enforcement operations. Grand Admiral Vex surveyed his forces with satisfaction. 20 capital ships, each capable of reducing a continent to ash. Over 500 support vessels. More firepower than had been assembled in 3,000 years. Facing him was the entirety of Earth's defense fleet. 212 ships of various sizes, most built in the past 50 years. Their technology was newer but untested in real combat. Their crews were brave but inexperienced against such overwhelming force. On paper, this battle was already decided. But Admiral Daeho Choi had not built his career on following what was written on paper. He stood in Earth's Defense Command studying tactical displays that showed the impossible situation. His staff waited for orders, their faces betraying the fear they tried to hide. They expect us to defend Earth directly, Daeho said quietly. They expect us to form defensive lines around the planet and wait for them to attack. That's what any logical military force would do. What are we going to do? His tactical officer asked. We're going to attack them first. Silence filled the command center. Then someone laughed nervously. Sir, you're joking? Do I look like I'm joking? Daeho pulled up a new tactical plan. The dreadnoughts are powerful but slow. They're designed for siege warfare, not fleet combat. We have speed and maneuverability. We'll use that. Captain Jiwon Park received her orders with a mixture of excitement and terror. She was to lead Strike Group Alpha directly at the dreadnought flagship. Not to destroy it, that would be impossible, but to keep it busy while other groups hit supply lines and support vessels. We're the bait, her tactical officer summarized. We're the distraction, Jiwon corrected. There's a difference. Bait just dies. Distraction accomplishes something before dying. That's not much better, Captain. No, Jiwon agreed. But it's what we have. The human fleet dispersed into dozens of small groups, each operating independently. Grand Admiral Vex watched this with confusion. They were abandoning defensive positions. Abandoning all military logic? Exposing themselves to concentrated fire. They're panicking, his second-in-command suggested. Breaking formation in fear. No, Vex said slowly. They're doing something else. Something we're not ready for. He had studied human military history in the past 3 days. These creatures had developed warfare into an art form, and their art was based on one principle: do the unexpected. All ships, defensive formations. Watch for surprise attacks. Too late. The first wave hit the dreadnought fleet's supply convoy from 4 different directions simultaneously. Human ships appeared, fired everything they had, and vanished before the escorts could respond. 3 supply ships exploded. 2 more were disabled. Then Captain Jawan's Strike Group Alpha appeared directly in front of the flagship, at point-blank range. Every alarm in the dreadnought's bridge began screaming at once. How did they get so close? Lex demanded. They're FTL drives, sir. They don't follow standard jump protocols. They can make short-range jumps with pinpoint accuracy. The flagship's weapon systems activated, but Jawan was already moving. Her ship and the others in her group danced around the massive vessel like insects around a giant. They couldn't damage it seriously, but they could irritate it, distract it, keep its attention focused on them instead of the rest of the battle. A second wave of human ships hit the dreadnought fleet's formation from behind. They targeted sensor arrays and communication hubs, equipment the Council had not prioritized defending because no one had ever been crazy enough to attack them this aggressively before. Commander Sun Ho Lee led this assault with surgical precision. His destroyer disabled the command relay on a dreadnought, cutting it off from the fleet's coordination network. Without centralized orders, the massive ship had to operate independently, reducing overall fleet effectiveness, but the battle came with terrible costs. The human destroyer Brave Heart took a direct hit from a dreadnought's main cannon. The ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in an instant. 37 other human vessels were destroyed in the first hour of combat on Earth. President Yoonji watched the battle reports with a heavy heart. Each destroyed ship represented hundreds of lives lost. Families that would never be whole again. Children who would grow up without parents. Madam President, an aide said quietly. Some council members are requesting a communication channel. The diplomatic faction. Put them through. Councilor Yesa's face appeared on the screen, her insectoid features showing what might have been distress. President Kwan, this slaughter serves no purpose. Your people are dying. Your fleet will be destroyed. Please reconsider integration before more lives are lost. Councilor Yesa, I appreciate your concern, but these people chose to be here. They chose to fight. I will not dishonor their choice by surrendering while they're dying for our freedom. Freedom isn't worth this price. That's not for you to decide. It's for us. Every human who stands in those ships knows the risk. They're there anyway. That should tell you something about how much freedom means to us. Yesa fell silent for a moment. Then I am sorry. Sorry that we allowed things to reach this point. The channel closed. But Yoonji noted that Yesa had said we allowed, not you forced. The counselor was beginning to understand that the council bore responsibility for this conflict. Dr. Minji Kang worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing battle data and council communications simultaneously. She noticed something interesting in the encrypted transmissions between council ships. Confusion, uncertainty, fear. The dreadnought crews are rattled, she reported to Ambassador Yunsik. They've never faced an enemy that attacks like this. All their training is based on overwhelming static defenses. They don't know how to fight a mobile, aggressive opponent. Can we exploit that? Maybe. I'm also seeing increased communications from other council species. They're watching this battle. Some are asking questions about why the council needs such massive military force if it's supposed to be a peaceful federation. We need to amplify those questions. Hyunsik activated the broadcast system. They had been preparing. Time to tell our story to the galaxy. The broadcast went out on every frequency, transmitted through relay stations the humans had secretly established. It reached far beyond council space, touching species in every corner of the galaxy. Ambassador Nam's voice was calm and clear. This is Ambassador Hyunsik Nam of Earth. I speak to all species who can hear this transmission. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Council has maintained peace through control. They offer safety in exchange for sovereignty, protection in exchange for freedom. We were asked to accept these terms. We refused. Not because we seek conflict, but because we believe every species has the right to determine its own future. He paused, letting the words sink in across countless worlds. Today, Earth fights for that principle. We do not fight to conquer. We do not fight to impose our will on others. We fight only to preserve our right to choose our own path. Some will call this foolish. Some will call this suicide. We call it necessary. The transmission included footage from the battle. Human ships, tiny against massive dreadnoughts, fighting with desperate courage. The destroyer Morning Star's sacrifice. Captain Unikim's daring run through the blockade. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things. We tell you this not to ask for help, Hyunzik continued. We tell you this so you know an alternative is possible. So you know that submission to the Council is not inevitable. So you remember that your ancestors once had the same choice we face today. We hope they chose wisely. We hope you can too. The broadcast ended. Within hours, it had been received by millions of worlds. The Council tried to jam it, to suppress it, but the message had already spread too far on a world called Taurus Prime. A species that had joined the Council 4,000 years ago received the transmission. An old historian named Boren listened with growing fascination. He had spent his life studying his species' pre-integration history, records that were incomplete and often contradictory, but he remembered enough. His ancestors had resisted integration for 2 years before surrendering. The Council had promised peace and prosperity. They had delivered it at the cost of his species' independence. Their military traditions, their ability to expand beyond prescribed limits. Boren made a decision. He sent a message to Earth, encrypted and routed through dozens of relay points to avoid Council detection. The message was simple: you are not alone. Some of us remember. Some of us are watching. Some of us might be willing to do more than watch. Similar messages began arriving from other species. Most were cautious, non-committal, but a few were bolder. A few suggested that if Earth somehow survived this conflict, they might consider their own relationship with the Council. The battle continued for 3 brutal days. Human ships fought with increasing desperation as their numbers dwindled. The dreadnoughts were slowly adapting to human tactics, learning to predict the unpredictable. Captain Jiwon Park's soul's pride had taken heavy damage. Half her crew was dead. Life support was failing. But she kept fighting, kept drawing fire away from Earth and the other ships. "Captain," her tactical officer reported, "we've lost main weapons. Engines at 20%. We can't keep this up much longer." The standoff lasted for 7 hours. Grand Admiral Vex waited for orders while his dreadnought fleet hung in space alongside the combined human and allied forces. Neither side moved. Neither side fired. The entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. On Earth, Admiral Deho used the time to reorganize his battered fleet. Only 93 human ships remained operational. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and exhausted. But they had accomplished something impossible. They had fought the Council's ultimate weapon to a standstill. More importantly, they had inspired others to remember what freedom meant. Captain Boren's Tarian vessel maintained position beside what remained of the human fleet. His crew was scared but determined. They had spent 4,000 years as Council members, living comfortable lives under Council protection. They had forgotten what their ancestors sacrificed when they surrendered independence. Earth reminded them. Earth showed them that submission was not inevitable, that some things were worth fighting for even against impossible odds. "This is insane," Boren's second officer said. "We're facing dreadnoughts. One shot from those ships could destroy us." "Yes," Boren agreed, "but we're facing them by choice. That makes all the difference." In the Council chamber, the debate raged on. Councillor Yessa led the faction demanding an end to hostilities. High Magistrate Vorn led those calling for Earth's complete destruction as an example to others. "If we back down now, the Council's authority collapses," Vorn argued. "Every species will think they can defy us. There will be chaos, war, suffering. And if we continue," Yessa countered, "we prove that the Council rules through fear and force, not wisdom and cooperation." We become the tyrants that human Ambassador Nam accused us of being. The insectoid counselor activated a display showing communications data. Look at this. In the past week, we've detected increased transmissions among 70% of council species. They're discussing Earth's resistance. They're asking questions about integration terms. They're remembering their own histories. Let them ask questions, Vorn said. Questions fade. Dead martyrs inspire revolutions. We should have destroyed Earth immediately when they first refused. Now we must finish what we started. An elderly counselor from a species called the Prith stood slowly. She rarely spoke in council sessions, but her voice carried weight. I am old enough to remember when my species joined the council. I was young then, barely aware of politics. But I remember my grandfather's tears as he watched our military fleet be dismantled. I asked him why he cried if we were joining a peaceful federation. He said, because we are giving up the right to defend ourselves. We are trusting strangers with our future. She looked around the chamber. My grandfather was wise. We did give up that right. And for 4,000 years, the council has protected us, guided us, controlled us. We are safe. We are prosperous. We are not free. Freedom without security is meaningless, Vorn objected. Perhaps, the Prith counselor replied. But security without freedom is imprisonment, no matter how comfortable the cell. The debate continued, but Yessa could see the tide shifting. Too many counselors were beginning to question things they had taken for granted for millennia. Earth had planted seeds of doubt that would take generations to fully bloom, but the growth had begun. President Unji Kwan received regular updates from the battle zone. The standoff continued. No one was shooting. For now, Dr. Minji Kong worked in her laboratory, analyzing the communications between the Allied ships. She found something beautiful in the data. Species that hadn't communicated directly in centuries were now talking to each other, sharing stories, remembering their histories. We're creating something, Minji told Ambassador Hyunsik Nam. Not just surviving a military threat. We're creating a movement. Movements require more than inspiration, Hyunsik replied. They require structure, organization, a clear alternative to what exists, and let's give them one. Minji pulled up a document she had been working on. A charter for a voluntary alliance. Species that want to remain independent but cooperate for mutual benefit. No mandatory technology sharing. No population controls. No military restrictions. Just cooperation by choice. Hyunsik read through the draft. The Free Alliance. Better name than the Council, Minji said with a slight smile. At least it's honest about what it offers. They sent the charter to the Allied ships in orbit. Within an hour, responses began coming back. Most were cautious but interested. A few were enthusiastic. Captain Boren transmitted a message that summed up the general feeling. This is what the Council should have been. Back in space, Grand Admiral Vex finally received his orders. The Council vote had concluded. The margin was narrow, only 12 votes, but the decision was made. He read the order twice to be certain he understood correctly. Stand down. Do not engage Earth or Allied forces. Return to Council space. A diplomatic solution will be attempted. Vex sat in his command chair for a long moment. He had expected to either destroy Earth or be destroyed trying. He had not expected this. The Council, after 10,000 years of absolute authority, had blinked first. He opened a channel to Admiral Deho. Human Commander. This is Grand Admiral Vex. I have been ordered to withdraw from this system. The Council wishes to pursue diplomatic channels. Is this a trick? Deho asked bluntly. No trick. No honor in tricks. You fought well, human. Your people are fierce, unreasonable, stubborn beyond logic. But you fought well. Thank you, I think. Take this as a warning, not a compliment. The Council is standing down, but many members still believe you should be destroyed. This is not over. It never is, Deho replied. But for today, we'll accept the ceasefire. The Dreadnought fleet began its withdrawal. Slowly, maintaining defensive formation, but leaving nonetheless. The human and Allied ships did not pursue. They were too damaged, too exhausted. and honestly too surprised. When the last council ship vanished from sensors, Admiral Deho finally allowed himself to slump in his chair. They had done it. Somehow, impossibly, they had done it. "Sir," his communications officer said. "The president is calling." Yunji appeared on the screen, tears streaming down her face. "Is it over?" "For now," Deho said. "The council has withdrawn. We're still independent." "At what cost?" Yunji asked, looking at the casualty reports. "Over 12,000 dead. 68 ships destroyed. Countless wounded." Deho's voice was heavy. "The price of freedom, Madam President. Ask me in 100 years. If we're still free then, if our children grow up making their own choices, then yes. It was worth it." The news spread across Earth within minutes. People poured into the streets, celebrating their survival and mourning their dead simultaneously. It was a strange mixture of joy and sorrow. Victory and grief. Ambassador Hyun-sik Nam addressed the United Nations the next day. His speech was broadcast across the galaxy, received by billions of beings on thousands of worlds. Yesterday, humanity faced extinction rather than surrender our freedom. We did not face it alone. 37 species stood with us, remembering what they had forgotten, reclaiming what they had surrendered. Together, we forced the Galactic Council to recognize that some things cannot be taken by force. He paused, looking directly at the cameras. But we did not win a war yesterday. We won a battle. The larger war, the war of ideas, continues. The Council still exists. The integration terms still stand for most species. Nothing has fundamentally changed except that now, maybe, some species remember they have a choice. Yunsik activated a display showing the Free Alliance Charter. Earth proposes an alternative, a voluntary association of independent species. No mandatory terms. No forced compliance. Just cooperation by choice. We invite any species that values sovereignty to join us. We will share what we can, help where we're able, and defend each other if needed. But always by choice. Always freely. The response was overwhelming. Within a week, 42 species had sent delegations to discuss joining the Free Alliance. Most were small frontier species far from Council core worlds. But some were larger, older, more established. They had been waiting for someone to show them an alternative was possible. The Council watched this development with concern. Councillor Yessa had been elected as the new speaker, replacing Thelmer, who resigned in disgrace. Her first act was to announce a comprehensive review of integration terms. "The Council must evolve," she declared. "We have maintained peace through control. Perhaps it is time to maintain peace through cooperation." High Magistrate Vorn and his faction walked out of the session in protest. The Council was fracturing along ideological lines. Some wanted reform. Others wanted to maintain traditional authority. The debate would last years, but for the first time in millennia, debate was possible. Earth had proven that the Council's way was not the only way. That open space for alternatives. Captain Jawan Park's sacrifice had not been in vain. The Soul's pride was gone, but her final action had blinded the flagship long enough for Allied ships to arrive safely. A memorial was built in orbit around Earth, bearing the names of all ships and crew lost in the battle. Commander Sun Ho Lee stood before that memorial 3 months later. He had survived the battle but lost too many friends. "We showed them," he said quietly to the names carved in metal. "We showed them that humans don't surrender. That some of us don't quit. You didn't die for nothing."